everyone, my name is Laura and welcome to my channel Boundless Books. It is already April, so I am way overdue on my March wrap-up. So today I'm going to go over all the books that I read in March. I'm also going to go over some of the books that are on my to-be-read list for the month of April. No time to waste, so let's just get into this list. The first book that I read during the month of March was the one that I was most highly anticipating, and that is The Winter's Kiss by Marie Rutkoski, and this is the third book in the Winter's Crime trilogy. Yes, it's finally out! I'm always very nervous whenever I pick up the final book in a trilogy because there's a lot of anticipation going into it, you never know what the author's gonna do, and sometimes you can be disappointed, but I was not disappointed at all with how the author chose to conclude this trilogy. I thought it was great. I've talked about this series a few times in some of my other videos, so I'll include links right down here where you can go check those out, but a brief synopsis of what happens. This series is set in a fantasy world that's kind of based off of the Roman Empire, and it follows the daughter of a general and a young slave trying to lead a rebellion to free his people. In book 2 of this series, both Aaron and Kestrel were very distant, both in terms of actual physical distance and also in terms of their understanding of what the other was doing within the story. So I was a bit disappointed to see how those two never really got to interact in the second book, but I was very excited that the author brought everything back together, smoothed out all the misunderstandings, and really resolved the series in a way that was very satisfying for me. Obviously the love story is a large component of this novel, but I thought that Marie Rutkoski really didn't neglect the rest of the world that she was creating. It was fully realized, very detailed, and it made me just care about the characters even more and the relationship that they were developing with one another. I rated this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I had such high expectations when I read the first book in the series, and I was not disappointed in this final book. I thought the author tied off a lot of the loose ends from the second novel really well, and overall I was just very pleased with how this series ended. There were a few moments that dragged a little bit in the middle, but that's pretty standard in any novel, so that's pretty much the only reason why I didn't give it a 5 out of 5 stars. So I can say with confidence that you should definitely pick up this series because it is now concluded, and if you haven't already started reading it, then you can sit down and read it all in one setting, which is the best way to read a series. My one complaint about this series is that they changed the cover like halfway through. Why did they do that? The first cover was great, here it is. And then they changed it to this, which I think is kind of generic looking and not as cool as the first one. Book publishers, why? Why? Just continue on with what you had. It was lovely. The next book that I read this month was A Criminal Magic by Lee Kelly. First off, the premise of this book is fantastic. It's set in 1920s Prohibition era America, except rather than alcohol being prohibited, it's this byproduct of magic called shine that is prohibited. The novel has a joint narration structure where it follows this one character named Joan, who is this sort of down and out sorcerer who gets pulled into the mafia to make a little extra money, and then this other character, Alex, who is this society boy who's fallen on hard times, and he becomes an undercover cop attempting to infiltrate the mafia that is selling shine illegally. I'm intrigued, very intrigued. I thought the beginning of this book was excellent. The author did a really good job setting up who Joan is and who Alex is and making their narrative voices very distinct. I also love the world building that the author does in the initial chapters of the book. I thought that she provided details about the world and set the ground rules in a way that was pretty seamless with the rest of the narration. I've never really read a fantasy book with a premise like this before, so I was very engaged initially. However, I was a bit disappointed to find that the narration kind of slows down a little bit as you get into the middle of the book. The two main protagonists don't meet until about 2/3 of the way through the novel, and when they do meet, a lot of their interactions are extremely superficial, which I found a bit surprising given how detail heavy the author was initially. So overall, I gave this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. By far my favorite aspect of this novel was the magic system that Kelly created. I thought that it was really well done, especially the initial descriptions of the magic system were very cool. One standout scene for me is when a bunch of the sorcerers are gathered together and they're constructing this house sort of room by room with magic, and that the way that the author described that was super cool. As much as I love the magic system in this book, I just thought that it really wasn't enough to save the fact that the story was very rushed towards the end. And I'm actually left wondering if this is a standalone novel or not, because so many things were left unresolved by the time this concluded that it makes me hope that there's going to be another book in this series. So if you were to ask me whether or not to pick this book up, I would say hold on it and wait to see if another one comes out, because as it stands, I felt pretty dissatisfied at the end of this novel, and I really want to know if more happens. The next book that I read during the month of March was Bronze Gods by A.A. Aguirre, and I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but I believe that it's a pseudonym for a husband and wife writing duo. After reading A Criminal Magic, I was really interested in reading another fantasy book that also involved crime fighting, so that's what initially made me pick this up. This book is almost 3 years old, but it's the start of a series of steampunk investigative novels, so I thought it would be a good time to start reading it now so I can binge on it if I like it. This steampunk novel follows two detectives in a criminal investigation unit, Makani and Ritsuko. Makani is this hard-boiled and gruff detective who has this sixth sense for solving crimes, which might be somewhat magical. Ritsuko is the first woman detective in the department, and she's out to prove that she is just as capable as any man. Throughout the course of the novel, the two main characters are out to solve the disappearance of a wealthy young noblewoman, which might have some magical involvement. Initially, I was really intrigued by this novel. I loved the film noir undertones. However, I kind of thought that the momentum died halfway through, and for that reason, I set this aside and I actually have not finished this yet, which I planned to do, but I'm finding it really hard to find an excuse to pick it back up again, which is never a good sign for me. So overall, based on what I have read of this book, I would have to give it a 2 out of 5 stars. I don't think it's completely fair of me to rate it at this point, given that I haven't finished it. So when I do finish it, and I promise I will finish it, I will update my rating and review on Goodreads. So I'll include a link in my description box down below where you can follow me on Goodreads so you can see what I think when I finally finish it. However, right now, 2 out of 5. And the last book that I read during the month of March / am still finishing is Magician Apprentice by Raymond E. Feist, and this is the first book in the Riftwar saga. I actually decided to pick this series up after a comment from one of my lovely viewers, Valentine's Week, thank you, who reminded me how awesome Raymond E. Feist is. So I've actually read this series, or at least the first 2 in the series, when I was in high school, and I remember loving them. But it's been a while, so I don't really remember it all too well. So I decided to pick these up on Amazon. Sadly, they're not available on ebook, which disappoints me, but oh well. So I picked them up on Amazon used, and I'm very happy to be reacquainted with the series again. This high fantasy series follows a young man named Pug, who at the beginning of the novel is 15 years old, living within the Duke's household, and unsure of what his future will be. However, he comes under the notice of the magician at the Duke's court and is taken on as an apprentice. What makes this series different from the average high fantasy novel, in my opinion, is that it involves a little interdimensional travel. I remember these books being really awesome and exciting when I read them in high school, and I am not disappointed as I'm rereading these. This first book has been really fun, and I just enjoy Raymond E. Feist's writing a lot. He does a good job of balancing plot and character development, and keeping the pace going pretty quickly. Even though I haven't completely finished this book, it's all coming back to me now, and I can remember what happens in these final few pages, so I can definitely rate this a 5 out of 5. It's a classic fantasy series, and it's very enjoyable if you've never read it before. That's actually a really nice segue into my TBR list for the month of April, because top of the list is the rest of the Riftwar saga. So I actually read the next book in this series back in high school, Magician Master, and I remember loving this. Pug's a little bit older and his magic just becomes even more badass, so that was really enjoyable to read about. And then following that is A Darkness in Sethanon, I think that's how you say that, and Silverthorn. But I believe these 2 books in the series follow different protagonists, but they're in the same world. So I'm really interested to see how this series concludes, and I'm really happy that I picked it up, not only because it's such a good story, but how awesome are the covers on these editions that I bought? I don't know, really cool. They're beautiful typography and color choices. The next book on my TBR list is actually one that Wisdom House Books was kind enough to send to me for review, and that is Fateball by Adam W. Jones. So I actually don't know too much about this book, and I'm intentionally not reading up too much about it so I can go into it without any preconceived notions. But right off the bat, I love the cover of this book. I think it's really cool. And based on the synopsis on the back, it seems like it's about 2 characters, one of them who is struggling with addiction. So I'm very excited to dig into this, and I'm actually going to be doing a review of just this book later on in the month, so stay tuned for that. The next book on my TBR list is one that I've actually sneakily already started because I was way too impatient to wait to read this, and that is Mirror King by Jodi Meadows. And this is the next book in the Orphan Queen series, and might be the final book. I think it might be a duology, I'm not 100% sure, but I'll let you know when I finish it. Orphan Queen was actually one of my favorite books that I read during 2015, and I even talked about it a little bit in one of my previous videos, which I will link to right here for you guys to check out. So naturally, I was very excited when I saw that the follow-up book was coming out this month, and I snatched it up right away and started reading it. Things ended on a major cliffhanger when Orphan Queen ended, and Mirror King picks up right where that left off. So if you were a fan of the first book in the series, this one just throws you right back into the story, and it is wonderful. And then the last book on my TBR list for April, we'll see if I can actually get through all these books, is Flamecaster by Cinda Willaims Chima. I love the author's Seven Realms series, and I can't believe I've never talked about it in any of my videos before because it's probably one of my top YA fantasy series of all times. And this book is supposed to be set in the same world, just a generation later. So there's a potential for some disappointment because I'll find out the fate of some of my favorite characters from the first series. But at the same time, I love the first series so much that I'm very excited to jump back into this world again. So my expectations going into this book are pretty high. And if for some reason you haven't checked out the Seven Realms series yet, definitely do that first because it is awesome. It's kind of like Harry Potter, but for an older group of readers. It's also set in a high fantasy world, which is very cool. So I'll include a link to that in the description box down below so that you can pick that up. So that's it. That's everything that I read during the month of March and also everything that I hope to read during April. Let's see if I can actually make my way through all these books. Let me know in the comment section down below what books you're excited to get through this month. And please be sure to subscribe so you can stay updated on my latest videos and to give this video a thumbs up. Until the next time, my name is Laura and thank you so much for watching. Bye! Happy dance! Happy dance! I'm excited for it.
I'm so scared.
Should I redo it?
Maybe.